I stood in the center of the grand ballroom, surrounded by a sea of unfamiliar faces, each one more polished and perfect than the last. The sound of clinking glasses and murmured conversations filled the air, but none of it reached me. Not really. It was all just background noise as I focused on the man in front of me, my father, Richard Montgomery, who was raising his glass to my brother Jake's 300th guest wedding. "Here's to Jake," Dad said, his voice booming, not just for the people nearby but for everyone in the room. He always had a way of commanding attention. "Your wedding will be perfect, son. You deserve it. When's your turn?" "Lane's hell." The words hit me like a slap. The air around me seemed to freeze, even though the warmth of the room clung to my skin. Dad's words echoed through the space. A casual remark that meant nothing to him but everything to me. My jaw tightened, my fingers clenching around the glass in my hand. It wasn't the first time he'd said something like that. It never was. In fact, it was becoming routine. But tonight, at Jake's wedding, it felt all these people. It felt like the final straw. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. My mind was working in slow motion, replaying every moment from my childhood, from my teenage years, every moment I'd spent trying and failing to live up to my father's expectations. I finally managed to say something, my voice steady even though my heart was pounding in my chest. "It already happened," I said, my words cutting through the laughter and chatter. "You were invited. Your favorite son threw it in the trash." The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, everything stopped. Even the fire crackling in the marble hearth seemed to go quiet, as if it too had heard my words and couldn't bear to listen any longer. Jake, standing next to me, laughed nervously, glancing around the room, unsure whether to laugh with me or pretend I hadn't just thrown our family's dirty laundry into the open. My mother, Trinity, perched on the ivory settee across the room, straightened, her fingers tapping restlessly against the arm of her chair, a clear sign of her discomfort. But Dad didn't flinch. He didn't react at all, his gaze still fixed on the glass in his hand, swirling the amber liquid like it held some kind of secret he wasn't ready to share. "You shouldn't joke like that," he finally muttered, his tone dismissive. I stood there, looking at him, feeling the weight of his disappointment crash down on me. I didn't know what hurt more, the words themselves or the fact that, deep down, I knew he wasn't surprised. He wasn't shocked by my bitterness. He wasn't shocked that I'd finally snapped. He'd seen it coming, and in that moment, I realized just how tired I was. Tired of trying. Tired of seeking approval from people who would never see me for who I really was. Tired of watching Jake get everything, while I stood in the background, waiting for my turn, a turn that would never come. "Excuse me," I said quietly, setting my glass down on the nearest table. "I need some air." Without waiting for anyone to respond, I turned and walked out of the ballroom, my shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor. Behind me, I heard my father call out, but I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I had nothing left to say to him. I stepped out onto the terrace, the cold December air biting at my skin as I leaned against the stone railing. The view of the estate, covered in a blanket of snow, looked perfect from this distance. But it was all just an illusion, wasn't it? Behind the pristine facade of this grand house, behind the perfectly wrapped presents, and the lavish decorations, was a family who couldn't even show up for my wedding. I didn't expect anything different. Maybe I should have. I didn't. It was always the same with them. I had sent out those invitations with so much hope, trying to prove to myself that this time would be different. I spent 3 days picking out the perfect cardstock, making sure the font was elegant but not too formal, making sure the velvet ribbons were tied just right. I could still feel the weight of the paper in my hands. A small thrill of getting the details perfect. And I thought, no, I knew, that when the invitations arrived, when my family saw how much effort I'd put into them, they would care. They would show up. I wanted them there more than anything. But they didn't. They didn't even acknowledge the invitation. And when the ceremony started, 2 empty chairs sat in the front row, one for my father, one for my mother. It felt like a joke, a cruel punchline I couldn't escape. I hadn't heard from them in weeks. I tried calling once, but my dad had picked up and said, "I'm too busy right now." No apology, no explanation, just a wall of indifference. I couldn't even tell Emily about it at first, not because I didn't want to, but because I was ashamed. Ashamedly how much I wanted them to be there. Ashamed of how much their absence hurt. So I'd kept it to myself, pretending that everything was fine, that the wedding, despite everything, had gone off without a hitch. I had spent the entire day looking around, hoping to see my mother's face in the crowd, hoping my dad would show up at some point, even if just to give me a look, some small sign that he still cared. But no. The wedding went on without them. And I had to swallow the bitterness of that empty space where they should have been. And now, here I was, standing outside on a freezing terrace. And to hold it together while my brother's wedding was being celebrated inside, with my family raising glasses to everything they'd built and nothing I ever would. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the H in my chest. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the French doors opening behind me. Aang, turn around. I didn't have to. I knew who it was. Emily stepped out, her heels clicking softly on the stone as she walked toward me. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside me, her presence a comforting weight. She didn't need to say anything. I knew what she was thinking. She knew everything. You okay? She finally asked, her voice quiet but steady. When she always spoke when she was trying not to push too hard. I nodded, but the truth was I wasn't. I wasn't okay. I was so far from okay, I didn't even know where to start. I trailed off, swallowing the lump in my throat. They're just so indifferent. It's like I'm invisible to them, like I don't matter. Emily sighed and placed a hand on my arm, her touch warm against the chill in the air. You do matter. You matter to me. I gave her a small, bitter smile. I just don't get it. Why does it feel like I'm always trying to prove myself to them? Why does it feel like nothing I do will ever be enough? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she just stood there with me, watching the snow fall in thick, silent sheets, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I wanted to ask her if she thought it was worth it. Worth all this pain, this constant running after something that would never come, but I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to ask her. Not yet. Do you want to go back inside? Emily asked after a long pause. I shook my head. No. Not yet. I just need a moment. She nodded, her hand slipping from my arm as she took a step back, giving me space. I appreciated that. I didn't need words right now. I just needed to breathe. His soundly ladder from the ballroom filtered through the terrace doors. And I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. The laughter. The music. The chatter of my family and their friends. All of it felt so distant, so far removed from me. It wasn't my world. It wasn't my place. To Mindy, that was the hardest part. To realize that no matter how much I tried, no matter how much I wanted to belong, I would always be an outsider in my own family. I wasn't sure what I was looking for out there in the snow. I knew I couldn't go back inside just yet. Not until I had figured out how to live with this ache in my chest. I walked back into the ballroom, the warmth hitting me like a wave. But it did nothing to ease the cold knot in my chest. Inside, the conversations hummed along, each one as meaningless as the last. My family was here, celebrating my brother's wedding. As though nothing had happened. As though I wasn't standing on the outside, looking in. My heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. Jake, always the golden child, was at the center of it all, his easy smile lighting up the room as he clinked glasses with guests. Amanda stood nearby, her attention fully on him, her smile that practiced one she reserved for when the cameras were on. She glanced at me once, but it was brief. Like she didn't even remember I was there. A fleeting glance before she turned back to Jake. I pushed through the crowd, trying to keep my face neutral, but I could feel it, the weight of being invisible in my own family. It was suffocating. I tried to shake it off as I moved to the bar, ordering a whiskey, hoping the burn in my throat would match the one in my chest. The bartender, a stranger, set the drink in front of me without a word. I wasn't sure if I wanted the drink or the escape it promised. My hand shook slightly as I picked it up, but I hid it well, hiding behind the glass as if it would somehow shield me from everything I couldn't change. As I stood there nursing the drink, I felt a presence beside me. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Bella. My younger sister. The one who could do no wrong. The one who had everything I could never have. The one who always had their attention, their affection, their praise. She leaned casually against the bar. Her engagement ring catching the light just enough to make sure I noticed. I hadn't missed the subtle way she'd flashed it earlier, when Dad gave his toast to Jake. The 3-carat diamond was impossible to ignore, just like her smug smile. She asked, the fake sweetness in her voice making my skin crawl. I didn't answer right away, instead taking another sip of the whiskey. The burn didn't help, but it was something. I finally looked at her. She was fanning me with that look she always gave, the one that never seemed to see me for who I was, only who she wanted me to be. I'm fine, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the frustration swirling inside. Bella tilted her head, a mocking gesture. It's just that. You don't seem fine. You've been standing off by yourself all night. I'm not standing by myself. I'm here, I replied, the words slipping out more curtly than I intended. She smiled, unfazed. Right here. Well, I'm sure you'll be okay, Maxwell. You always are. Her voice dropped to a lower, more sincere tone. You know, Mom and Dad were talking about you earlier. They're just worried. I felt my jaw tighten at the mention of our parents. The worry they were talking about wasn't genuine. Nankel was. It was more like an excuse to lecture me, to push me into a mold that was never meant to fit. What do you mean? I asked, keeping my voice flat, even though I could feel the heat rising behind my words. Bella shrugged nonchalantly, swirling her drink. They think you've been avoiding them. Not that I blame you, with everything that's happened. But maybe it's time you stop holding on to the past, Max. You can't keep pretending like nothing's wrong and expect things to magically fix themselves. I could feel my blood pressure rise. How dare she? How could she stand there, acting like she knew anything about my past, about my struggle to get their approval, and now tell me I should just let it all go? It was too much. She had no idea. Maybe it's time for you to stop pretending that everything's perfect, Bella, I said, my words cutting through the air. Maybe you should stop thinking that being the perfect daughter, the one who does everything properly, is the answer to everything. You don't know what it's like to constantly be the backup plan. Ella's smile faltered for a split second, but she quickly regained composure, her eyes narrowing in that all too familiar way. I'm just trying to help you, she said, her voice now tinged with annoyance. You act like this is all some grand conspiracy, but the truth is, you're just not trying hard enough. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her everything that had been building inside of me for years, the resentment, the hurt, the anger. But instead I kept my voice level, my gaze steady. I'm trying, Bella. Ain't been trying for years. But it's never enough, is it? No matter how much I give, it's always you who gets everything. The approval, the attention, the praise. And I've had enough of it. I turned on my heel and walked away, not waiting for her response. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed space. I needed to stop pretending that this family, my family, could ever give me what I needed. I didn't go back to the party. Instead, I found a quiet corner of the house, anchored away from the noise, and tried to collect my thoughts. I leaned against the wall, my breath shaky, the anger bubbling just under the surface. The whole evening had been a performance, but the cracks were showing now. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I was tired of pretending I was fine. I wanted to walk away, to leave the estate and never come back, but I knew I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I finally confronted them. It was time. I had spent years trying to fit into a role that was never meant for me, always in the background, always second best. But I wasn't going to play that part anymore. I heard footsteps, faint at first, then closer. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Jake, my brother, the golden boy. The one who could do no wrong. The one who had always been the favorite. The one who could do whatever he wanted and still be praised for it. He stopped just behind me, his presence filling the space between us. You okay, Max? He asked, his tone surprisingly gentle. For a second, I almost believed him. Almost thought he cared. But I knew better. I'd known Jake my whole life. He was never there for me when it counted. He never had been. It was always about him. Always about his successes, his weddings, his perfect life. Yeah, I said, not turning to face him. Just needed a minute. You've been acting off all night, he said, his voice edged with concern. When I could hear the subtle hint of dismissal there. The undertone that told me he wasn't really interested in how I felt. Just in making sure I wasn't ruining the night. I clenched my fists at my sides, the weight of everything pressing down on me. You don't get it, Jake, I said, my voice tight. You don't know what it's like to constantly be pushed aside, to be nothing but a footnote in our family's story. You've always been the one they care about. The one they talk about. The one they show off. Jake shifted, family uncomfortable with the accusation. Max, I didn't know, I interrupted, finally turning to face him. You didn't. But that's the problem. You never had to. You were always the one they loved. The one they supported. The one who could do no wrong. I could see the confusion in his eyes. The way he tried to process my words, but he didn't get it. He never would. I never asked for that, he said, his voice quiet, defensive. I never asked to be the golden child, Max. You think I don't see how mom and dad treat you? You think I don't see the way they expect you to fail? Then why didn't you say something? I shot back, the words sharp. Why didn't you stand up for me? Why didn't you ever stand by me? Sam, you've always stood there, acting like everything was just fine, while I was drowning. Jake opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He looked like he was searching for the right words, but they never came. Instead, he stood there, eyes downcast, as if everything I had said had finally hit him. He had always been the favorite, and in some way, I hated him for it. Not because I didn't love him, but because I was tired of being invisible. I turned away, my heart pounding in my chest. Wasn't gonna do this, not now, not with him. I'm done, Jake, I said, my voice hollow. I can't do this anymore. I'm done pretending everything is okay. Ain't letting you and mom and dad treat me like I'm just here to pick up the pieces when you've all moved on. I heard him take a step toward me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I couldn't bear to see his face. The face that was always the one to smile, to get praised, to be the one everyone looked at and said, he's the one who made it. I'm not the one who gets to have everything, whispered to myself. I never was. I walked away before Jake could say another word, before I could hear the fake sympathy in his voice that I didn't want to hear anymore. As I moved through the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking away from something bigger than just a family dinner. I was walking away from my entire life, the life I had spent so many years trying to keep together, Trying to hold on to a family that never really cared about me. I stepped outside again, the cold air biting my skin, and I just stood there. I didn't know what to do next. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something shift inside of me. It wasn't relief. It wasn't freedom. But it was something. And maybe that was the first step toward finally breaking away. I found myself standing in the middle of the hallway. My hands clenched at my sides, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I hadn't planned on this moment. I hadn't planned on confronting my father, or anyone really. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had no choice. The years of being ignored, the years of feeling less than, of always coming second to Jake, it all had to come out. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the shaking in my hands, and I turned toward the ballroom again. The music had slowed down, and I could hear the soft murmur of voices, the faint clink of glasses. Inside, it all looked like perfection, a family gathered in celebration, just like it had been for years. But it wasn't perfect, never had been. I pushed the doors open, stepping back into the space where everything had started. My father was standing by the bar again, his back to me, but I could see him through the reflection in the polished mirror above the counter. It was swirling his drink, just like he always did when he wanted to avoid a conversation. His posture was perfect, poised, the image of composure. But I knew him better than that. I knew exactly what that posture meant: control. It was all about control with him. Control of the family over me. I didn't care if anyone was watching. I wasn't gonna let this moment slip away like so many others had. Not this time. Dad, I said, my voice steady though my stomach was churning. He didn't turn around. He didn't even acknowledge me at first, and that silence felt like a slap. I wasn't sure how much longer I could stand it. I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend to be invisible in my own life. I said again, louder this time, my voice cutting through the music. Finally, he looked up. He didn't seem surprised to see me standing there, but I could see the flicker of annoyance in his eyes. He put his drink down slowly, as though he was calculating his next move. His lips parted as if he were about to say something dismissive, but I wasn't having it. I need to talk to you, I said, taking a step closer. You know what I'm going to say, he replied, his voice low, measured. This isn't the time for a family discussion, Maxwell. Jake's wedding is. Don't, I interrupted, my frustration bubbling to the surface. Don't you dare pull that card. Not now. Not when you've ignored me for years. Not when you've treated me like I don't exist. He looked taken aback by the rawness of my words, his hand tightening around his glass. But he still didn't look at me fully. Not like he used to when I was a kid, and he wanted to make sure I was paying attention. This is exactly why we can't have these conversations, he said, his voice suddenly cold. You always make it so dramatic, so difficult. Dramatic, I repeated, feeling the sting of his dismissal cut deeper than I wanted to admit. My whole life walking on eggshells around you. Everything I've ever done was never enough, never good enough. And every time I tried to talk about it, you shut me down. You turned me into a joke. You made sure I stayed in the background. You let Jake have everything, and I was just the afterthought. Maxwell, he sighed, as though this conversation was beneath him. You're being unreasonable. No, I said, stepping closer, my voice sharp with anger now. I'm not being unreasonable. I'm finally speaking up. I'm tired of pretending I'm okay when I'm not. I'm tired of this family pretending we're perfect when we're broken. You don't even see it, do you? You never see it. I can see the frustration building in his eyes, but instead of lashing out, he just gripped his glass tighter, his jaw clenched. You need to get over this, he said through gritted teeth. You're an adult now. You can't keep acting like the world owes you something. No, I said, my voice rising, the words spilling out like I had been holding them in for far too long. The world doesn't owe me anything. But you do. You owe me years of your indifference. You owe me an apology for making me feel like I was never good enough. You owe me the family I've been trying to earn for all these years. His face hardened, his eyes narrowing as he finally met my gaze. Really met it for the first time in ages. I don't owe you anything. My heart cracked, but I didn't back down. I couldn't. Yes, you do. You owe me the truth. The silence between us stretched out, thick and suffocating. I didn't know what I expected from him, but I knew it wasn't this. I didn't want his sympathy. I didn't want his excuses. I just wanted him to see me for the first time in my life. You're wrong, he said finally, his voice colder than it had ever been. You've always been wrong about all of this. I stood there, staring at him, trying to understand. But the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. He would never change. I would never get the apology I so desperately needed. And that moment, I realized that I had been waiting for something that was never going to come. Without another word, I turned and walked away, the heavy weight of his rejection hanging over me like a cloud. I didn't need him to validate my feelings anymore. I didn't need his approval. I was done. The last thread of hope I'd been clinging to snapped, and I felt the cold rush of freedom wash over me. It hurt. It hurt like hell, but it was the only way forward. I wasn't going to beg for their love anymore. I walked out into the cold, the wind biting at my face, but it didn't matter. The air felt sharper than I'd ever known, like a fresh start. Something I didn't have the luxury of before. I felt my hands shake, but I couldn't tell if it was the cold or the rage still coursing through me. Either way, I needed to hold it together. I reached the back of the house, stepping onto the patio where the snow had begun to pile up. My mind was racing, too fast, too loud, but I knew I had to do this. I couldn't keep carrying this anger inside me. I had to confront it. I had to confront them. I stood there for a long moment, watching the snow fall, trying to fanny my breath. But it wasn't enough. The frustration, the years of hurt, the constant belittling, it all swelled inside me, building to a point where I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to expose it. I needed them to see the truth. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, my thumb finding the message thread with Nate. I had been waiting for the right moment, waiting for the signal that would finally force my family to acknowledge me, to finally see me. Now, typed, the message sent instantly, and I watched it, the words feeling like a heavy weight lifting off my shoulders. I stared at the screen, the tension coiling tighter in my chest. I wasn't sure what Nate was doing on the other side, but I knew he'd be ready. And walked back toward the house, my heart pounding harder with each step. I felt like I was walking into a storm, and part of me was terrified that once I opened that door, everything would fall apart. But the other part of me, the part had been waiting for this moment for years, was hungry for it. Ready to burn it all down. I pushed the door open and stepped into the ballroom again. The room was still alive with laughter, with chatter. It all sounded so empty now, so hollow. I didn't care about the noise. I didn't care about anything but one thing. I had to make them see. I had to make them face the truth. I made my way toward my father, who was talking to Harrison Sterling near the bar. They both stopped talking when I walked up, and my father's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't say anything, just stared at me like I was something he couldn't quite place. "I need to speak to you," I said, my voice colder than I expected. "What is it now?" He asked, his voice clipped, like he was already over whatever I had to say. "I'm done with the games," I said, my hands shaking with the weight of the moment. "I'm done pretending like this family is anything but a lie. A lie you've been feeding me for years." The room went quiet. Even the music seemed to fade into the background as I spoke. Harrison shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us, but I didn't care about him. This was between me and my father. "You think you can just walk in here, make accusations, and walk out like it's nothing," my father said, his voice rising, but I didn't back down. "I'm not making accusations," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the tension. "I'm telling the truth. The truth that you've been ignoring for years. You've made me feel small, like I don't matter, like I'm nothing compared to Jake. And I'm done. I'm done being your second choice." Anger that had been simmering inside me for years broke through, and I could feel the heat rising in my face. My father stood there silent, his jaw tightening. He didn't know how to respond, and that was the moment I realized how much power I had in that room. For once, he was the one speechless, and it felt fucking good. "I'm not the problem," I continued, stepping closer to him, my eyes never leaving his. "Is you. You've been gaslighting me for years, pretending like you didn't know how I felt, pretending like it was all in my head. But I'm done letting you control the narrative. I'm done letting you make me feel like I'm nothing." My father's face went pale, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, fear of losing his grip on everything, but I didn't care. He didn't deserve my respect, not after everything he'd done. "I've tried to play by your rules," I said, my voice hardening. "I've tried to be the son you wanted, but I'm not going to pretend anymore. Not for you. Not for anyone." There was a moment of silence, and then, before he could respond, I pulled out my phone again. I didn't hesitate. I opened the file I had prepped with Nate earlier, evidence, hard and irrefutable. My finger hovered over the screen, and I pressed play. The video footage began to play on the large smart TV mounted on the wall. His scene unfolded in perfect clarity, the FedEx truck arriving at our house, the signature on the delivery tablet, my signature, Bella's signature. The timestamp read clearly February 12th, the day my invitations were sent. My father's face drained of color as the video continued, showing Bella throwing the packages into the recycling bin without even opening them, the careless way she tossed them aside as if they were trash. The room stood still, the silence deafening. I watched my father's face shift, the realization dawning on him. He looked over at Bella, who was now pale, her eyes wide with panic, but I didn't care. She had manipulated us all for too long. "This is the truth," I said, my voice steady, almost calm now. "You didn't forget, you chose not to show up. You chose to lie to me. And I have the evidence to prove it." Bella opened her mouth to say something, but the words caught in her throat. Preston was standing beside her, looking between us, his expression blank, unsure of what to believe. But I could see it in his eyes. He was beginning to piece it all together. I didn't do this, Bella said, and her voice trembled. I was protecting Mom and Dad. You don't understand. No, I interrupted, shaking my head. You weren't protecting anyone. You were hiding the truth because you were afraid of losing everything. And now, you're going to face it. And room was silent, but the weight of everything I had just said hung in the air. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. Not anymore. Now, I said, turning to face my father one last time. What are you going to do about it? The silence that followed was suffocating. My father stood there, eyes locked on the screen, his face a mask of disbelief. Bella was frozen, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the words to deny what was in front of her. But she couldn't. She had nowhere to hide anymore. The evidence was right there. The lies were right there, laid bare for everyone to see. I could feel the eyes of the room on me, every gaze heavy with judgment and shock. But I didn't care. I didn't care about the judgment anymore. For once, it was the truth that mattered. It was the truth that would break this family wide open, no matter how much it hurt. Preston's expression had shifted from confusion to something darker. Disgust, maybe. And he was silent, and that silence was more damning than any words could have been. He glanced at Bella, then back at the screen, his jaw tightening. He wasn't sure who to believe. But I could see it in his eyes, the realization that the woman he was about to marry wasn't who she pretended to be. It wasn't the first time I had seen the cracks in her facade, but this was different. This wasn't just about family drama anymore. This was about her integrity, or the lack of it. Bella, is this true? Preston asked, his voice quiet but sharp, the weight of his words pressing down on her. Did you really throw the invitations away? She turned to him, her face pale, her eyes wide, but for the first time, I saw something in her face that I'd never seen before. Fear. Fear of being exposed. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her lips trembled as if she couldn't find the words that would fix this, that would make everything okay again. I crossed my arms, watching her struggle. The satisfaction of seeing her break was bitter, but it was what she deserved. She had made me feel small for so long, made me doubt myself, doubt my worth, just to protect her own image. She had destroyed me piece by piece. But I wasn't going to let her do it anymore. It's not what you think, she finally stammered, trying to regroup. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I was just trying to protect Mom and Dad. I was afraid the wedding wouldn't be good enough. You don't understand. No, I said, cutting her off. I understand perfectly. You were protecting yourself. You were too busy worrying about what people would think about the perfect Montgomery family to actually care about me. About us. My voice trembled with anger. But I kept going. You never cared about me, Bella. You never cared about anything but your own image, your own position in this family. I could see her struggling to hold on to her composure, but it was slipping and I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. She had thrown my wedding away, and for what? To protect a version of this family that didn't even exist. She had built herself up with lies, manipulating every moment to fit her narrative. And now she was getting exposed. Soundly, Bella whispered, but it was too late. The cracks in her facade were too big to hide now. I did it for them, Max. I did it for you, for me. I repeated, incredulous. You think throwing away my wedding invitations was for me? You think I needed your protection? I didn't need you to protect me from anything, Bella. I needed you to be there. To show up. But you didn't. None of you did. She backed away from me slowly, her eyes darting around the room, looking for someone, anyone, to validate her actions. But she was alone now. Her mask had shattered, and there was no going back. I turned to look at my father, who had remained eerily quiet through it all. His face was ashen, his lips pressed tight, but his eyes betrayed him. They were wide with shock, with guilt, with something deeper that I couldn't quite name. For the first time, I saw the cracks in him, the years of unresolved tension, the weight of all the things he had ignored, all the things he had chosen not to see. Dad, I said, my voice quiet now, almost too calm. Is this what you wanted? For me to be invisible? For me to be erased from this family? Because that's what you've done. That's what all of you have done. You made me feel like I wasn't worth showing up for, like I was a mistake, like I was just an inconvenience. He didn't respond immediately, but I could see the storm brewing behind his eyes. The guilt was there, the regret, the fear of everything falling apart. But there was something else too. Something colder. A defense mechanism he had built up over the years. You're wrong, he said finally, his voice tight, as though he was trying to maintain control. You're making this up. You're exaggerating everything. No, it's not, I said, my voice rising again, the anger and frustration breaking through. This is everything you've done. Everything you've let happen. You let Bella manipulate everything. And you let me think I wasn't good enough to be part of this family. You let me suffer in silence. And you didn't even care enough to see it. You've always been more concerned with your business, with your image, than with your own son. Harrison Sterling shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly out of his depth. Preston was still standing, his face a mix of disbelief and disgust, like he was watching a slow-motion train wreck unfold before his eyes. He looked at Bella, his eyes searching for something to hold on to, but he didn't find it. Bella collapsed into her chair, her hands trembling as she wiped the tears that hadn't quite fallen yet. I didn't care. I couldn't care anymore. Not after everything she had done. "I'm not the problem," I said again, my voice finally steady. "I'm not the one who's broken. You all are." There was a long pause, a deafening silence that seemed to stretch for eternity. I didn't know how it would end. Well, I knew it wouldn't be the same. Things were already shifting. I could feel it. And this time I wasn't going to let them pull me back into their twisted little world. "Get out," my father said finally. His voice low, filled with something I couldn't quite read. I didn't wait for him to say anything else. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room. The weight of everything finally lifting. The damage was done. But in that moment, I knew that this was the beginning of something different. Something better. I stood on the doorstep, the cold December air biting at my skin, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. It was strange, like stepping into a new world, a world I had been too afraid to enter before. My fingers trembled as I pulled the door open, the echo of my family's chaos still ringing in my ears. I could hear the laughter from inside, the sounds of a celebration I had no part in anymore. I wasn't part of that world anymore, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I ever wanted to be again. I stepped outside, my boots crunching in the snow as I walked away from the mansion, from the life I had spent so many years trying to fit into. The night felt endless, and yet, in a way, a family at the beginning of something. I reached my car and paused for a moment, my hand on the door handle. The weight of everything I had just done, everything I had just lost, was still heavy in my chest. I had no idea where I was going next. I had no plan, no direction, but that didn't matter. I didn't need a plan. Not anymore. I needed to stop pretending, stop trying to be what they wanted me to be. I slipped into the driver's seat and started the engine, the heat blasting through the vents. I called aimlessly at first, not sure where I was going, just needing to get away. Away from the lies, away from the family that never truly saw me. Away from the world they had tried to force me into. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, and I glanced at it. It was a message from Emily. I had almost forgotten about her in the chaos of the night, but there she was, waiting for me to come back to the real world. "You good?" I smiled softly, typing back quickly. "Yeah, I'm fine." On my way home, the weight in my chest lifted a little. The thought of going back to her, to the life we had built together, giving me a sense of peace. She was the only one who had ever truly seen me for who I was, who had never tried to change me. And for the first time, I realized that was enough. I drove for what felt like hours, the streets unfamiliar in the dark. My mind was spinning with everything that had happened, the confrontation with my father, the way everything had unraveled. But through the chaos, there was something clearer now than it had ever been before. I wasn't going to beg for their love anymore. I wasn't going to chase after something that was never meant for me. I pulled into the driveway, the lights of Emily's car shining in the distance. I didn't have to knock. I didn't have to explain. I just walked in, feeling the warmth of the house wrap around me. "Hey," Emily said from the kitchen, her voice light and warm. She stood there, wiping her hands on a towel, a slight frown on her face as she looked me over. "How'd it go?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. I crossed the room and pulled her into my arms, holding her close. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The weight of my family's expectations, of their judgment and manipulation, started to melt away, piece by piece. In that moment, none of it mattered. Not their rejection. "I'm done, Em," I whispered into her hair. "I'm done trying to fit into a life that was never mine." She didn't say anything at first. She didn't need to. She just held me tighter. She understood. Like she had known this moment was coming even before I did. And as I stood there, in the quiet of our home, I realized that for the first time in my life, I was free. Free from the chains of my family's expectations. Free to be who I was without apology. I had my own life to live now, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. "I'm proud of you," she said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. Feeling at her, something break inside me. But it wasn't the same kind of break I had felt before. This was different. This was a release. I smiled, a small but genuine smile, and I kissed her forehead. "Thank you." I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for being here." I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I felt ready to face it. With Emily by my side, with the strength I had found in myself, I could build a life that was truly mine. And for once that was enough.